share in this panel this afternoon. I will address your question by speaking to the case of small island developing states and how we're dealing with some of these issues, some of the trying to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. And I'll speak first on ocean and how we're doing. I mean, that's a very important topic for small island developing states, as you know. For us, oceans aren't just another sector. They're a defining feature of our countries, economies, and cultures. For the Marshall Islands, we are more than 99% ocean. So that means we rely very closely on the ocean for food security, for economic growth, for our culture and identity. To translate this to SDG perspective, this isn't just relevant to SDG 8 on oceans, but oceans will impact many other targets and goals. Some of our key ocean goals include strengthening enforcement to reduce illegal fishing on our waters and surrounding high seas pockets. Another one is securing further arrangements or agreements with distant fishing nations on sustainable practices and limits. Another one is on championing support for small island developing states on boosting our marine management capacity for our vast EEZ. Here we are not only ensuring our food security, but as a major source of global tuna stocks, we are contributing to world food security. We need to return to the drawing board and build the political will necessary to end global plastic pollution, whether through a treaty or other means, and to implement the PB&J treaty as it enters into force. Like oceans, climate change poses impacts and challenges across the development spectrum. But for small island developing state, and our case as an atoll nation with no higher ground, climate change remains an outsized challenge. This is why AOSIS and small island states have always strongly emphasized the need for a global spotlight on climate. One of the most important ongoing challenges to address is the need for more effectiveness and access from larger international finance sources. In parallel, we are advancing efforts at the IMO to drive a just and equitable transition in the transportation sector, linking this work directly to climate action through practical, inclusive solutions and reflect the realities of small island states. These efforts are guided by SV Juranai, our wind and solar power sustainable sea transport vessel. The Oceans Conference is vital in keeping and building international strategies. We're glad that we were able to participate in the last one in Nice. And it builds momentum towards sustainable strategies needed to better protect and sustainably use the world's primary common resource, which we all share. That's our ocean. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Madam President, and just reminding us that these agreements that we have, they're all about us trying to get our mitigation goal right. And so therefore the conference that we will have of the parties in Brazil will be important for the nationally determined contributions, our NDCs, to really align with 1.5 degrees. The rising sea levels would then begin to be mitigated. But also to say it's also about plastics. It's about the way we are all consuming in this world and what it contributes to the pollution of the oceans. Tisok, Michael, Martin, over to you. Ireland knows what it means to build peace step by step. Around the world, conflict is eroding decades of SDG progress, and nations are spending more money on weapons today than in any point of history. So how is Ireland drawing on its own experience of reconciliation, an advocate for peace, and why does its steadfast commitment to development cooperation matter in keeping the promise of the goals?
First of all, thank you very much indeed. And we have used and endeavoured to apply the lessons of the Irish peace process. People may not recall, but we had about 25 years of violence, particularly in Northern Ireland, which overlapped into the Republic of Ireland and into the United Kingdom. Terrible atrocities were carried out. It was a lot of hate, a lot of bitterness, but we managed to develop a peace process. And the most fundamental aspect or ingredient for peace is political will on all parties at the table. And we have endeavoured to help other conflict areas around the world, building on the lessons that we have learned. And no one conflict situation is the same, and I would acknowledge that there are conflict areas that are perhaps more complex, but I would say to people, 26 years after the peace in Northern Ireland, we are still working on reconciliation. And only last week, the United Kingdom government and the Irish government agreed a framework to deal with the legacy of the conflict in a sustained way in terms of giving closure to the families of victims on all sides. So a peace process doesn't end with the signing of the agreement. It is enduring, and you have to keep working at it. And reconciliation takes a lot of hard work, day in and day out, to build understanding. We've participated in the peace process in Mozambique. We have people in Colombia working with the Colombian government in terms of the peace process there. We're mainly peacekeepers, so we've been in Lebanon for quite a long time as part of UNIFIL, as part of the UN mission there. We've been in Chad and Liberia down through the decades. So we've been in many parts of the world as peacekeepers. But increasingly, we're there to try and help, if we can, to share our knowledge and experience in terms of conflict resolution. In terms of the Sustainable Development Goals, the most fundamental problem we have right now, or challenge, is we need to reassert multilateralism. And I take your point that all the world, the vast majority of leaders are here, which is a good thing. But we have alternatives beginning and developing around us, let's be honest. We have seen very significant, consistent attempts to undermine the multilateral order, and the UN as well, and UN bodies. So what we try and do in our own development program is to be a predictable source of finance to countries and to the UN agencies, so that they can plan appropriately, so that we can avoid shocks in terms of funding allocation, so that the agencies within the UN have a fair idea what Ireland will be able to allocate to them next year and the year beyond, and increase. Now, we've been in a position, thankfully, that we can increase our aid on an annual basis. But that we've come around to the view that that predictability is very important, so that people can plan and be more efficient then in how they do things. And we have worked with the poorest countries in sub-Saharan Africa in terms of development aid. Ireland experienced a famine in the middle of the 19th century, in 1845. It effectively halved our population. And it is only now, in 2025, that Ireland has recovered to its pre-famine population of 1845. That's how long it has taken. But that has had an impact in our approach to world hunger and famine. It's why Irish people are appalled at the man-made famine and catastrophe in Gaza right now. It's why we have a very strong, and if I dare I say, sophisticated food system approach to enabling countries who are furthest behind to develop sustainable food systems. We were an agricultural country, we still are, but we've developed technology and so on. So we believe in the food area, in developing, food systems that are sustainable for many communities around the world. Strategically, equality for women and girls is a central part of our overall global development framework. And we work with people as opposed to trying to tell people how to do things. So we work with the small island developing states. We have developed a strategy in our development program for small island development states, but we did that in collaboration with the small island states, developing states, asking them, you identify for us what are the immediate needs and so forth. And then what lessons can we learn from our engagement with others. And I think that's the more sustainable approach, I think, to reaching the Sustainable Development Goals. And we have that commitment because of our past experiences, particularly on the hunger side. And education, we do a lot of good work, if I say so, on education. And you can see 100 million people have access to, additional people have access to education. Why? Because in our own culture and history, there was times when Irish people couldn't access education. And the story of modern Ireland is education and mass participation in education. And it's been a transformation over 60 years, which has enabled us to be strong economically and societally. And so we are passionate about giving people access to education and doing what we can in that area, and health services as well. They're the kind of key thematic priorities. Sorry if I've gone a bit too long, but we approach it thematically, strategically. We have clear goals, but we believe in predictability of funding, certainty, and so that people can plan accordingly.
Thank you very much for sharing that. I think we'll all remember that this institution was born out of a war, and that wars and conflicts just don't pay. What pays is to invest in development, and when we don't, and you shared that with us with the famine, it can have impacts on generations to come. And I think this is where our Pact for the Future really asked us to look about what we do today and the impact it has on future generations. So thank you for sharing that with us. President Hunt, you're the first woman to lead a country in Micronesia and the first person to earn a doctorate in the Marshall Islands. You've not only been an educator, but also a climate activist. Why is activism so important in driving sustainable development and the SDGs forward? You've got a lot in the audience that are looking for some guide there as to how they leave these halls and we continue to bring activism to get those SDGs in the next 5 years.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. And I think just to go directly to why it is important to be activist. I mean, I didn't start out being an activist, but in the course of the work and trying to deal with the issue of climate change, you know, as you know, it's been a long road coming so many years to now, and we still haven't reached where we need to reach as far as climate change. And so for us, if we don't do it, who is going to do it? I mean, we're like 2 meters above sea level. And we're living the effects of climate change every day. And so for us, you know, we made a commitment to go into the international community and advocate for our future. Otherwise, it's leaving it to chance and letting other people decide our future for us. And although we're not contributing to emission level, we still have to take part, to take leadership in making sure that we're going after our energy sources using renewable energy, turning our shipping fleet into ships that uses solar energy and wind. So we're doing the best we can do to show, to show example that it can be done and that all of us need to take part to make changes in climate change, for example. So I think it's a matter of importance for us. We cannot leave it to chance. We have to take ownership of the solution as well as convincing the world about our where we're at and the need for the world to commit. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's all about we the people, and that's certainly what the Charter espouses for us all. It isn't just about your advocacy for what the world needs to do, but everyone's standing up to be counted. And we appreciate that the SDGs are that, we say that's our compass, that's our way forward. But turning to you, Tisoc, on a personal level, what motivates you to lead Ireland to use its voice and partnerships to defend multilateralism, but also to show that global solidarity is not just a principle of the past, but a pathway forward?
Well, I suppose at a very fundamental level, I became involved in politics at a young age to try and change things for the better in my own local community, then nationally, and as a national leader globally. And as a small island state, Ireland sees the multilateral system as our ultimate security guarantor. That's what guarantees our security. If might is right, and if big, large powers think they can invade your neighbour, then we don't have security. And so we're passionate about multilateralism. But we have also seen that multilateralism works and can work spectacularly in so many areas of human endeavour. And notwithstanding, at times we become very pessimistic in terms of progress and so on, enormous progress has been made. On climate, we've come a long way, not fast enough maybe, but we have come a long way from where we were 2 or 3 decades ago. In terms of education, participation, we've come a long way. And in terms of food and so on, we've come a long way, but we've a lot more to do. But we made that progress because of multilateralism. People pooling resources, people working together will achieve a lot more. It's a very basic principle. It works. Challenges today that there's quite a number of significant powers who don't believe in multilateralism and are seeking to undermine it. So I think actually within the UN and within amongst ourselves here, we do have to think afresh as to how we counteract this growing sort of skepticism or undermining of multilateralism. There is an obligation on us to sort of cry halt. You know, we believe in this, and we're going to. We need to reassert ourselves in terms of the primacy of multilateralism in the world, and not shrink back from articulating fundamental principles in respect of sovereignty, territorial integrity, the dignity of every people, of every person, and the dignity of nations and peoples. And I think that's something at times we can drift into a certain fatalism or resignation. There's nothing we can do. Well, actually, there is a lot we can do, and we just need to keep at it.
Thank you. Fighting for the courage of our convictions, and it's a personal, but it's also collective for many of us. And I think that when we see the Charter or multilateralism being undermined, it's not so much how much of the resources are being withdrawn from different pots, whether it's development or it is the UN itself. It really is about the principles, it's about the values, it's about the institutions that do help us to create the systems that are needed for health, for education, for jobs that are decent and that people can live a life of dignity. Thank you for sharing that. Well, we have got 2 ministers who would like to join this conversation. So if I may shout out for the Minister for Jacques Assou from Côte d'Ivoire.
La Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As was recalled by both the panelists, less than 10 years after their adoption, fewer than 20% of the SDGs are on the right path to be reached. Extreme poverty continues to threaten many people, and many continue to suffer from hunger. In this context, this event, my country, Côte d'Ivoire, welcomes the holding of this flagship event on the SDGs organized on the margins of the 80th session of the General Assembly. Côte d'Ivoire is well aware of the difficulties that we face in meeting these goals. So what we've done is that we have reduced our poverty rate that has fallen from 51% in 2011 to less than 40% in 2019. We have provided access to electricity for more than around 80% of the population. We have set up compulsory schooling, improved school performance rates, and launched important projects such as solar panel parks and others. However, we continue to face challenges: youth inequality, youth unemployment, social inequality, climate change, among others. That's why we have taken a strategy to speed up our achievement of the SDGs in our development plan. This is focused on the energy transition, food security, water, sanitation, and mobilizing innovative financing. This is a struggle that is common to many. No country can meet these challenges alone. Côte d'Ivoire stands determined to continue on this path towards inclusive, lasting, resilient development, and we call on all states for a renewed global partnership to keep the promise that we made to our future generations. Thank you.
Thanks. Excellence, thank you for sharing with us the advancements that Côte d'Ivoire has made. Of course, we still have to get to 2030, and we do need to accelerate on a number of issues in West Africa. We are pursuing much with you on the energy transitions and also the fight against climate change. Thank you. I do have another Excellency, Honourable Kenya Barclay, the Minister of Planning and Economic Development for Sierra Leone.
Thank you and good afternoon. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, Sierra Leone stands with the international community to accelerate delivery on the 2030 agenda. At this SDG moment, I will briefly want to share 4 selected evidence-based results from our national efforts in 4 areas to leave no one behind. And these were the 4 areas that our President, who is unavoidably absent, Dr. Julius Maada Bio, would have presented. First, on nutrition education, our national and partner-supported school feeding interventions have reached hundreds of thousands of children. In 2022, approximately 486,000 primary school children in Sierra Leone were receiving school meals, and primary enrollment was recorded at around 2.7 million pupils, an essential foundation for improving and retention in learning. The other area, access to justice. Our Legal Aid Board has been scaled up as a government-funded frontline justice service. Independent analysis reports the board assisted some 150,000 people in 2023, 2/3 of whom were women and girls, demonstrating the practical reach and cost-effectiveness of nationally funded legal aid. These services have reduced catastrophic legal costs for vulnerable households and have strengthened social inclusion. Thirdly, on domestic financing for SDGs, our integrated national financing framework and pilot initiatives in revenue mobilization have strengthened our tax administration and local revenue collection. The 4th area, on accountability and recovery of public assets. Our Anti-Corruption Commission has made recoveries that are publicly reported and being redirected to service delivery. Madam Moderator, Excellencies, these results in nutrition for children, legal protection, and for the vulnerable, strengthen domestic finance, and concrete asset recoveries, amongst a range of others, are not incidental. They are the product of policy choices, scaling domestic solutions, partnering strategically with UN and other development partners, the private sector and civil society, and applying public financial reforms for the long term. Sierra Leone remains committed to using these hard-won gains to accelerate progress on education, gender equality, health, and governance. We call on partners to continue to support countries to scale proven solutions and to back national systems that mobilize domestic resources and deliver results for the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Minister, for sharing the importance of the focus on the policies that you need to take, but connecting them to domestic resources, and we hope creating that enabling environment for further investments. But focus on education is particular in Sierra Leone, and congratulations on thousands of girls that you have got back into school, and many of those dropouts that had a second chance. Incredible work. Before I turn to the lightning round with our two guests, is there anyone in civil society or a young person at the back there who has a reflection? So don't say we didn't create space. Okay, there's a lady standing up there. Please take the floor. We can hear you. What's your name?
My name is Alan Krita Dayal, and I am one of the representatives in the UN Major Group for Children and Youth. And on behalf of youth, I just wanted to applaud and recognize all of the achievements that we've been able to accomplish over the last 10 years in terms of our SDG goals. And there's definitely so much more work that we need to accomplish now. And the fact that we have so many folks from different aspects of society, youth, civil society, UN delegates, governments, all together in this room right now is just an incredible feat that we can come together and have this conference and speak about all of these different topics and how they intersect with all our, different aspects of society. So really appreciate that we have this session here today and that we have this whole week to be able to reflect and think about how can we further scale our accomplishments. So thank you on behalf of all of the youth.
Thank you very much for just demonstrating when your space is given, the youth fill it. So thank you for that. And I can see our youth envoy. Am I good? Am I good? Really, no, thank you very much. And as I turn to the lightning round on how we keep the promises of the SDGs, there's civil society. We said at the SDGs, leave no one behind. So perhaps I could turn to you, Tisok, and ask, what's the message for this audience that they would amplify and take out of these halls and how we keep the promise of the SDGs?
I think the message is, based on the progress that has been made in so many areas, it proves to us that we can actually do it, but we need to reassert and recommit with conviction to make strides in attaining the SDGs and the goals by 2030. So it really is about political will, re-energizing ourselves to go out there and do it, because we do have the models, we do know how to do it. And perhaps in terms of the timeline, the utilization of technology could be an accelerator towards the achievement of quite a significant number of goals. And that's something we should probably factor in to the next 5 years.
So advocate with your politicians. Courage of conviction for the activism that we need, but try using technology. And I know many of the young people in this room, day in, day out, use that, but let's also give a shout out for agencies like ITU, without which we wouldn't have the cell phones that we can go out and do that. To you, President Hein, same question. What do we need to do to keep the promise of the SDGs?
Well, thank you. I think we need to continue the commitments that we started and establish a stronger partnership to move the SDGs forward. We've done great work, although we're not there yet, but I think with persistence and commitment, we will get there. So thank you, everyone.
So partnerships, don't give up. The journey's not done yet. And we can see the Marshall Islands have been on that path for a long way and haven't given up. And I hope every one of you will go through this week harvesting what you can do, the partnerships that we can put together, the momentum that we can create, the collective action for trying to get the promise of the SDGs done by 2030. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for being such a great audience.
Thank you to the panelists. Thank you, Excellencies, DSG, for that compelling discussion Your insights are very inspiring, and the examples here will inspire us to take this work forward. Let's bring the lectern back. It is now my distinct honor to introduce our next speaker. If I could ask the panelists to please take their seats. It is my distinct honor to introduce our next speaker, Her Majesty and SDG advocate, Queen Mathilde of the Belgians.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, my field visits as SDG advocate to Bangladesh, Ivory Coast, and Costa Rica with HCR, UNICEF, WHO, supported by the Partnership Office, have all brought the same message home to me. The SDGs we are fighting for are essential to improve the lives of millions of human beings across the world. I can bear witness especially for the sectors I focus on: quality, inclusive, egalitarian education, the reduction of poverty, the promotion of women's and girls' rights, mental health, and the impact of climate change, such as rising sea levels in coastal zones. All those experiences have moved me and motivate me to lend my voice to all those who remain unheard. The work done by UN agencies, as well as national authorities and civil society, is remarkable. None of this would exist without our shared determination to realize the 2030 Agenda. None of this would exist without the tireless efforts of Secretary General Antonio Guterres and Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohamed. However, we must all acknowledge that, unfortunately, this is not enough. Crises are multiplying and dragging on. Multilateralism is under pressure. Finances are insufficient. Inequalities and poverty keep on increasing. But we cannot afford to be defeatist. It is all the more crucial at a critical time like this to take responsibility, to pool our efforts so as to realize the goals and values we signed up to in 2015. The needs and the goals are clear. The UN's commitment is stronger than ever. Our determination is renewed by the approaching target date of 2030. Let us keep those 17 SDGs at the heart of all our actions and decision-making, for it is only their realization which will enable us to make our world a better place, more egalitarian, more inclusive, more just, more peaceful, with no one left behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Queen Mathilde, for your remarks and for being here with us today. Now we will move towards our next segment. But before that, let us watch a short video on parallel realities by the UN SDG Action Campaign, which is a global initiative by the Secretary-General aimed at promoting the SDGs through advocacy, engagement, and creative action.
When you look at the world around us, what do you see? Do you focus on hope, love,
Bien. La 5e séance plénière.
The fifth plenary meeting of the High-Level International Conference for the Peaceful Settlement of the Question of Palestine and the Implementation of the Two-State Solution is resumed. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished heads of state and government, ministers, Your Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations Organization, Your Excellency Annalena Baerbock, President of the General Assembly, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor and a privilege for me to co-chair alongside the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia this conference in accordance with General Assembly Resolution 79/81 dated 3rd December 2024. We wish to extend a warm welcome to each and every one of you. Allow me now to deliver some opening remarks.
Madame la Présidente de
President of the General Assembly, Secretary General, Heads of State and Government, ladies and gentlemen. We've gathered here because the time has come. The time has come to free the 48 hostages detained by Hamas. The time has come to stop war, the bombing in Gaza, the massacres and the fleeing people. The time has come because there's a pressing urgency everywhere. The time for peace has come because we're just a few moments away from no longer being able to seize peace. This is why we have gathered here today. Some might say it's too late. Others might say it's too early. But one thing is certain. We can no longer wait. In 1947, this assembly decided on the splitting of mandatory Palestine across two states, a Jewish state and an Arab state, thus recognizing the right of each of them to self-determination. The international community granted to the state of Israel at last fulfilling the destiny of this people after millennia of roaming and persecution, and Israel founded a beautiful democracy there. The promise of an Arab state to date remains unfulfilled. Since then, there's been a long path of hope and despair intertwined, which Israelis and Palestinians have gone down, each in their own way. We have walked alongside them, each of us in keeping with our history and our sensibilities. But the truth is that we bear a collective responsibility for, to date, having failed to build just and lasting peace in the Middle East. This is what became evident to us on the 7th of October 2023, when the Israeli people suffered the worst terrorist attack in its history. 1,224 men, women, and children killed. 4,834 men, women, and children injured. 251 men, women, and children taken hostage. The cruelty of Hamas and all those who collaborated in this massacre dumbfounded Israel and astounded the world. The 7th of October remains an open wound for the Israeli soul and for our universal conscience. We condemn it unequivocally because nothing, never, nowhere can justify having recourse to terrorism. Minds go out and hearts go out to the victims and their families. We've expressed our compassion to all Israelis and first and foremost demand for all hostages still held by Hamas to be freed unconditionally. The French paid tribute to the 51 Frenchmen and women assassinated on that day and all other victims of October 7th. We will never forget them. Never. Just like we will never stop the existential fight against anti-Semitism. The French people know the sting of terrorism, and our hearts remember the expression of the bonds of brotherhood following the terrorist attacks committed in Paris on the 7th of January 2015, when dozens of foreign leaders were in the ranks of those offering their sympathies, among which the Israeli Prime Minister and the President of the Palestinian Authority. We know that you cannot show weakness in the face of terrorism, but we also know the perils of endless wars. We know that right must always prevail over might. We know from our own history that a universal commitment to peace, is the legacy of centuries gone by and the only way towards salvation. And on behalf of our friendship with Israel, our commitment to which has never faltered in the name of our friendship with the Palestinian people, for whom we want the initial promise of the UN Charter to be fulfilled, we want two states living side by side in peace and security to become a reality. However, currently Israel is further extending its military operation in Gaza with the stated objective of destroying Hamas. But there are hundreds of thousands of people who've been displaced, injured, famished, traumatized. Their lives are still being destroyed. Although Hamas has been considerably weakened, and despite the fact that negotiations on a permanent ceasefire are the surest means of ensuring the release of hostages, nothing justifies the ongoing war in Gaza. Nothing. On the contrary, everything compels us to definitively end it, since we didn't do it earlier. We must do this to save lives. The lives of Israeli hostages detained in atrocious conditions, the lives of hundreds of thousands of Palestinian civilians who are tormented by hunger, suffering, the fear of dying, mourning for their loved ones. We must save all lives, because for almost 2 years now, it is the denial of the humanity of the other and the sacrifice of human life which have prevailed. Yes, since the 7th of October, it is the life of the other that is being denied. We've been saying this since the first day of the war in Gaza. A life is a life. I know this because I held in my arms the families of hostages I met in Tel Aviv and in Paris. I'm thinking of the mother of Eata David, a hostage who was famished and displaced. I'm thinking of Nimrod Cohen, a 19-year-old hostage whose father I just met. I also know this because I was at the bedside of the Palestinian victims of Israeli military operations, refugees in Al Arish, women and children. I will never forget the way they looked at me. I know this because I met young people from Gaza who we are hosting in France. I'm thinking of Rida Baroud, who should have been with us today, who continues to bear witness to the distress of her loved ones in Gaza. A life is a life. We are duty-bound, all of us, to protect each other. This duty is indivisible, just as our common humanity is indivisible. There is a solution, a way of breaking the cycle of war and destruction. It lies in the recognition of the other, of his and her legitimacy, humanity, and dignity. We must reopen our eyes and see human faces there where war has deposited the mask of the enemy or the marks of a target. We must recognize that Palestinians and Israelis are living in twin solitude. The solitude of the Israelis following the historic nightmare of the 7th of October 2023, and the solitude of Palestinians. Palestinians at their wits' end in the face of this ceaseless war. The time has come. Because the worst could still come to pass. The sacrifice of more civilians, the expulsion of the people of Gaza to Egypt, the annexation of the West Bank, the death of hostages detained by Hamas, or facts on the ground which could irreversibly change the situation there on the ground. This is why, this is the very reason that today here in this chamber, we must pave the way for peace, because since July of last year, developments have accelerated. And at this point, we have reason to fear that the Abraham Accords, the Camp David Accords, could be called into question by Israel, and that peace would become impossible for a long time yet in the Middle East. It thus falls to us this historic responsibility. We must do everything within our power to preserve the very possibility of a two-state solution. Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace and security. The time has come. This is why, true to the historic commitment of my country to the Middle East, to peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians, this is why I declare that today France recognizes the state of Palestine.
Cette reconnaissance.
This recognition is a way of affirming that the Palestinian people is not a people too many. On the contrary, this is a people who never says goodbye to anything, as Mahmoud Darwish said. A people with a strong history, roots and dignity. The recognition of the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people takes nothing away from the rights of the people of Israel, who France supported from day one, and to the respect of which it is staunchly committed. This is why we're so convinced that this recognition is the only solution that will allow for Israel to live in peace. France has never wavered standing by Israel's side, even when its security was at stake, including when there were Iranian airstrikes. This recognition of the state of Palestine is a defeat for Hamas, just like for all those who foment anti-Semitism, nurture anti-Zionist obsessions, and who want the destruction of the state of Israel. This recognition by France goes hand in hand with others which will be announced today, and I thank them: Andorra, Australia, Belgium, Canada, Luxembourg, Malta, Monaco, Portugal, the United Kingdom, San Marino. They are here today. They answered our call issued in July and took the responsible choice, the necessary choice, the choice to opt for peace. Spain, Ireland, Norway, and Sweden are also going down the same path, and many others did before us too. This recognition paves the way for useful negotiations, useful for Israelis and Palestinians. This path is a path towards a peace and security plan for all. France and Saudi Arabia submitted this plan to this assembly, and it adopted it by a large majority. It carries our common ambition to break the spiral of violence and to change the situation on the ground. We managed to take a step towards one another, to move away from our habitual stances and to set concrete objectives. We must now set in motion a cycle of peace that meets the needs of all parties. The top priority of this peace and security plan, and it's very urgent, that is to ensure the release of 48 hostages and put an end to military operations throughout the territory of Gaza. I commend the efforts undertaken by Qatar, Egypt and the US to achieve this. I ask Israel to do nothing more that would thwart these efforts coming to fruition. Hamas was vanquished on the military front as we neutralized its leaders and decision makers. It must also be vanquished politically to be truly dismantled. As soon as a ceasefire is agreed, We must mount a massive collective effort to provide assistance to the people of Gaza. I'd like to thank Egypt and Jordan for their commitment and recall Israel's absolute obligation, that is to facilitate humanitarian access to Gaza to assist its population, which has lost everything. The second priority is to stabilize and to rebuild Gaza. A transition administration incorporating the Palestinian Authority, as well as the young people of Palestine, together with security forces, the establishment of which we will accelerate, will have the monopoly over security in Gaza. It will implement the dismantlement and disarmament of Hamas, and this with the support of international partners and the necessary means required for this difficult mission. France stands ready to contribute to an international stabilization mission, as well as to support, together with our European partners, the establishment and equipping of Palestinian security forces. As soon as negotiations permit, the Security Council could decide to deploy a civilian and security support mission, liaising with the Palestinian authorities and with the consent of the Israeli authorities. Furthermore, it'll be up to the state of Palestine to give hope to its people, tested by years of violence and occupation, division and negligence. It'll be up to the state of Palestine to give its people a framework for democratic expression, a framework that's been renewed and that is secure. President Mahmoud Abbas committed to this before Prince Mohammed bin Salman and myself. He forcefully condemned the terrorist attacks committed on the 7th of October 2023. He reiterated his commitment to disarming Hamas and committed to excluding Hamas from future governance in Gaza, as well as from future governance throughout Palestinian territory. He reaffirmed his commitment to combating hate speech and promised an in-depth overhaul of Palestinian governance. France will pay close attention to the full implementation of all of the commitments made to us. This renewed Palestinian Authority is a necessary prerequisite for the success of the indispensable negotiations we'll need to resume to come to an agreement on each of the final status issues. It's within this framework that I will be able to decide to open an embassy to the state of Palestine as soon as all of the hostages detained in Gaza have been freed and a ceasefire has been established. What France will be demanding of Israel will be just as considerable. Together with our European partners, we will be pegging, that is, our level of cooperation with Israel to the provisions, the measures Israel will be taking to put an end to the war and negotiate peace. It's thanks to this path that we will get a state of Palestine which is sovereign, independent, and demilitarized, bringing together all of its territories, recognizing Israel and being recognized by Israel in a region which will at last see peace reign upon it. What I also expect of our Arab and Muslim partners, who have not yet done so, is for them to uphold their commitment to recognize the state of Israel and to engage with Israel in normal relations as soon as the state of Palestine has been established. In so doing, together we will demonstrate dual recognition for the benefit of peace and security of all in the Middle East. Ladies and gentlemen, this establishes a demanding mechanism to end the war and enter into the negotiations phase. It allows for Israeli-Palestinian peace to be the first pillar of a new peace and security architecture in the Near East and the Middle East. It lends credibility to the possibility of further economic integration. Nothing will be possible unless the Palestinian authorities take full ownership of our renewed ambition so that we can at last achieve the two-state solution. I know that they're reluctant. I know that they harbor fears. And with the utmost respect, I hear the Israeli people, their sadness, their fatigue. But I want for the Israeli authorities to also hear this and to in turn take on commitments. I know that the Israeli people and the Israeli leadership have the strength to do this. I remember when I was a young man, when I learned of the horrible assassination of Yitzhak Rabin, almost 30 years ago. He was killed for wanting peace. When death was about to claim him, the heroic warrior of the State of Israel said, and I quote, I fought so long as there was no chance of peace, end of quote. But today, there is such a chance. Today, here, 142 states are proposing this peace. They're extending out their hands, ready to be shaken. So yes, the time has come to put an end to the war in Gaza. Massacres, death, right now. Urgency is what drives us. The time has come for Israel to live in peace and security from the Galilee to the Red Sea, through the Dead Sea and the Lake of Tiberias and Jerusalem. The time has come to no longer talk about the existence of the State of Israel. It's self-evident. The time has come to do justice to the Palestinian people and thus to recognize the State of Palestine, a brotherly country, a neighbor in Gaza, in the West Bank, and in Jerusalem. The time has come to cast out from these lands the vile face of terrorism and to forge peace. Yes, to forge peace. This is what has brought us here today. And we're very hopeful that we will be able to forge it. It is a choice we must make. It is our duty. Peace is much more difficult. It demands much more of us than all wars. The time has come.
Merci pour votre attention.
Thank you for your kind attention. I now invite His Royal Highness, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Saudi Arabia. He will be speaking on behalf of His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed bin Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, Crown Prince and Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, Your Excellency, President of the Republic of France, Your Excellency, Secretary General, Your Excellency, President of the General Assembly, distinguished guests, God, peace and blessings be upon you. I have the honor to deliver the statement of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia as a co-chair of this conference on behalf of His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed bin Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, Crown Prince and Prime Minister of the Kingdom. It is my pleasure to convey to you the greetings of His Majesty King Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, the custodian of the two holy mosques, and his wishes along with the Crown Prince's wishes for the success of this conference. We thank His Excellency President Macron and His Excellency Antonio Guterres for their efforts towards achieving the two-state solution. We thank him also for recognizing the State of Palestine. This conference is convened under the joint and co-chaired by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and France. At a time when the Israeli occupation authorities continues their aggression and their brutal crimes against our brothers, the Palestinians in Gaza Strip, and its violations in the West Bank and Al-Quds al-Sharif, and its repeated attacks on the sovereignty of Arab and Muslim countries, the latest of which was the attack against Qatar. This underlines the insistence of Israel to continue with its aggressive practices that threaten regional and international peace and stability and undermine efforts of peace in the region. This reiterates our deeply rooted conviction that the implementation of the two-state solution is the only way to achieve just and permanent peace. The historic position of His Excellency, the French President, to recognize the State of Palestine, and the fact that many countries have taken the similar courageous position, and the broad support for the resolution of the General Assembly to adopt the declaration, the New York Declaration on the peaceful settlement of the question of Palestine and the implementation of the two-state solution that received 142 votes in its favor reflects the will of the international community to render justice to the Palestinian people and consolidate their legal, historic right in line with international frameworks, relevant UN resolutions, and the Arab Peace Initiative. The Kingdom is keen on continuing its partnership with France and all countries calling for peace to follow up on the implementation of the outcomes of this conference, to put an end to the war in Gaza and stop all unilateral measures that threaten Palestinian sovereignty, to work on ending the conflict in the region and establish a Palestinian independent state on the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. In conclusion, we thank again those countries that have recognized or have announced their intention to recognize the State of Palestine. We call all other countries to take a similar historic step that will have a great impact on supporting the efforts towards the implementation of the two-state solution, achieve permanent and comprehensive peace in the Middle East, and find a new reality whereby the region can enjoy peace, stability, and prosperity. Thank you.
I thank His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed bin Salman Abdulaziz Al Saud. I now invite His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations Organization, to issue a statement.
Distinguished co-chairs, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I thank the government of France and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for convening this international conference on implementing the two-state solution. I also want to acknowledge the Palestinian delegation and once again note my disappointment that they were denied the opportunity to be fully represented. Excellencies, let's have no illusions. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict has gone unresolved for generations. Dialogue has faltered. Resolutions have been flouted. International law has been breached. Decades of diplomacy have come up short. The situation is intolerable and it is deteriorating by the hour. We are here today to help navigate the only way out of this nightmare, a two-state solution, where two independent, sovereign, democratic states, Israel and Palestine, live side by side in peace and security with their secure and recognized borders on the basis of pre-1967 lines, with Jerusalem as the capital of both states, in line with international law, UN resolutions, and other relevant agreements. I welcome the measures many member states are taking to galvanize support for the two-state solution, including the pledges to recognize the State of Palestine. And I welcome the General Assembly's endorsement of the New York Declaration. Excellencies, nothing can justify the horrific 7 October terror attacks by Hamas or the taking of hostages, both of which I have repeatedly condemned. And nothing can justify the collective punishment of the Palestinian people or any form of ethnic cleansing. The systematic decimation of Gaza, the starvation of the population, the killing of tens of thousands of civilians, most of them women and children, and hundreds of our own humanitarian. I call once again for an immediate and permanent ceasefire, the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages, and the immediate, full, safe, unconditional, and unhindered humanitarian access. Excellencies, nothing can also excuse developments in the West Bank that pose an existential threat to a two-state solution. The relentless expansion of settlements, the creeping threat of annexation, the intensification of settler violence, all of it must stop. The situation is morally, legally, and politically intolerable. We must recommit ourselves to the two-state solution before it is too late. A solution in which two independent, contiguous, democratic, viable and sovereign states are mutually recognized and fully integrated into the international community. Excellencies, those who stand in the way are obligated to answer a fundamental question. What is the alternative? A one-state scenario where Palestinians are denied basic rights, expelled from their homes and their land, forced to live under perpetual occupation, discrimination, and subjugation? How is this possible in the 21st century? How is it acceptable? This is neither peace nor justice. It will only increase the growing isolation of Israel on the global stage, and let's be clear, statehood for the Palestinians is a right, not a reward. And denying statehood would be a gift to extremists everywhere. Without two states, there will be no peace in the Middle East, and radicalism will spread around the world. Excellences,
Excellencies, this conference must mark a turning point. It must pave the way for irreversible progress, to put an end to the illegal occupation and to make good on our collective aspiration for a two-state solution. All of this is fully in line with adherence to international law. It has been approved by the General Assembly and supported by the international community. It is the only credible path towards a just and lasting peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians, and the only credible path towards peace and security throughout the Middle East as a whole. This will demand difficult decisions be taken from us all. This will demand courage and leadership based on principles from all sides. I urge you to do everything in your power to allow the two-state solution to prevail. This for the peoples of Israel, Palestine, and for humankind as a whole. I thank you. I thank the Secretary General of the United Nations Organization. I now invite Her Excellency Annalena Baerbock, President of the General Assembly, to make a statement.
Your Excellency President Emmanuel Macron, Your Royal Highness Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, Your Highness Prince Faisal bin Farhan, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies. Taking over the presidency of the General Assembly, I received many letters. One moved me deeply. Attached to it were drawings by 3 Palestinian children, Remas, Enas, and Tretal. The images were heartbreaking. One showed a school before and after, beneath a bright sun and a blue, clear sky. In the first, the school with open doors and happiness. In the second, their school lies in rubble. a lone boy stands on the debris of what must be once have been his safe place. Perhaps he had a favorite class, a favorite teacher, like our children, a best friend he played with there. Now, all of it is gone. All of the laughter of the children blown away. At that age, children should not be drawing pictures of war. Children should be learning mathematics. They should be playing with friends and scratch dragons or castles, not death and destruction. Yet, for the children of Gaza, this is their reality. Their horror lasted and lasts for over 700 days. Tens of thousands have lost their lives. Tens of thousands of dreams which never will come true. So many killed without the world even learning their names. Until we heard one voice so loud we could not overhear it. The voice of Hind Rajab, captured in a phone call with a red crescent while shelling rained down. After the car she was in was attacked over and over again, killing her aunt, uncle, and 3 of her cousins next to her. She called over and over again, "I'm so scared, please come." The rescuers tried to calm her as they tried to reach her. They could not. Hind was killed before help arrived. The world failed her. As the world has also failed Kfir Bas and his brother Ariel. Kfir was just 9 months old, the youngest child abducted by Hamas on October 7th, taken with his 4-year-old brother Ariel and their mother. Both were killed in Gaza by terrorists. The world will remember their names as symbols of innocent childhood stolen by terror. I've met with the families of the hostages, fathers, mothers, siblings, aunts, grandparents, still waiting for their loved ones to come home from wherever Hamas is holding them after more than 700 days. I've also met with Palestinian families, fathers, mothers, siblings, aunts, and grandparents, whose loved ones are buried in the ruins of Gaza. Their message is always the same: we want peace. Or as one Israeli mother told me, it does not bring my child back if a Palestinian mother loses her child in Gaza. Humanity is not about choosing sides. It's about recognizing that every life matters the same. A life is a life. A Palestinian girl's life is a life. An Israeli boy's life is a life. All the children of the Middle East deserve to grow up knowing only the sun shining on their schools, the laughter of their friends in the playground, and the joy of a meal shared with their families. Not the horrors of starvation, not the horrors of war and terror. Excellencies, the General Assembly has been very clear. We need an immediate, unconditional, and permanent ceasefire in Gaza now. Israel must immediately facilitate the full, rapid, safe, and unhindered entry and delivery of humanitarian assistance to all Palestinian civilians. Hamas must immediately and unconditionally release all remaining hostages. But the horrors of Gaza make equally clear that we cannot allow such devastation to happen again. While the situation in Gaza is unacceptable, settlement expansions and demolitions in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, are eroding any prospects for a political solution. The decade-long Israeli-Palestinian conflict cannot be resolved by endless war, permanent occupation, and recurrent terror. The only way to ensure that future generations of both Palestinians and Israelis can live in peace, security, and dignity is the two-state solution. As the Secretary General said, it's a right, not a reward, to live in your own state, as all humans around the world. We know that some think this is naive. The first resolution on this matter is almost as old as this organization. 78 years ago, the General Assembly adopted Resolution 181, laying the foundation for two states, knowing it's the only way for peace. And to those of you who argue now, but we have tried for decades and failed over and over again, there can be only one answer. If we would stop aiming for what is right because we have not succeeded yet, then evil would prevail. That would be the end of this institution. This institution which promised to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. It would erode the UN's foundational mission to achieve peace, justice, and equal rights for both Israelis and Palestinians. Excellencies, that is what today's conference and the New York Declaration are so crucial. The message we are sending today is no, we are not giving up. The international community does not only remain committed to the two-state solution, we are also identifying tangible, time-bound, and irreversible steps for its realization. And we are willing to take decisive measures and provide international guarantees. Of course, this conference and the New York Declaration will face criticism. Some will say a piece of paper cannot change realities on the grounds for Palestinians. Others will dismiss the vision of two states outright. But the fact remains, the New York Declaration was endorsed by 142 member states. And this majority clearly says the war in Gaza must end now. It condemns the attacks committed by Hamas against civilians on 7th of October. It condemns the attacks by Israel against civilians and civilian infrastructure in Gaza. It calls on Hamas to end its rule in Gaza and hand over its weapons. A sovereign and viable state of Palestine needs to be established, living side by side with the state of Israel in peace and security, with mutually recognized borders and full regional integration. Excellencies, the call for peace and the two-state solution is not an abstract. Not for the children watching missiles destroy their school. Not for the families waiting for news that their sons and daughters might be released from captivity. Not for the UN staff in Gaza who have witnessed their colleagues shot. Not for those who have been injured or maimed and will have to live with the trauma of this conflict for the rest of their life. It's an aspiration, but it's also an obligation. We owe it to the memory of Fint, Queer, and Ariel, and the many, many others. And we owe it to the children like Rimas, Enas, and Rital, and all the children of Palestine and all the children of Israel, hoping for a better tomorrow. so that they may not inherit rubble, grief, and despair, but safety, dignity, and hope to live one day in peace, side by side.
Je remercie Madame.
I thank the President of the General Assembly. I now invite His Excellency Mahmoud Abbas, President of the State of Palestine, to deliver a statement via video conference.
Thank you. Your Excellency, President Emmanuel Macron, Your Royal Highness, Prince Mohammed bin Salman Al Saud, Your Highness, Prince Saud Faisal bin Farhan, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Your Excellency, Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, distinguished leaders and heads of delegations, peace, mercy, and blessings of God be upon you. On behalf of the State of Palestine, I would like to express my deepest appreciation for the co-presidency, the United Nations, and all participating states for the historic New York Declaration that was issued during July's conference and adopted by the General Assembly by an overwhelming majority. It marked the beginning of an irreversible path towards ending the humanitarian catastrophe and ending occupation pursuant to international legitimacy and the Arab Peace Initiative. It was the embodiment of an independent state of Palestine with East Jerusalem as its capital, living side by side with Israel in peace, security, and good neighborliness. The declaration stressed that the war against our people must come to an immediate and durable end. It noted that the crimes emanating from the siege, the starvation, and destruction cannot be a means of achieving security. Therefore, we call for a permanent ceasefire. We need to ensure humanitarian access through the United Nations and UNRWA. We need to guarantee the release of hostages, all hostages and prisoners, with the withdrawal of the occupation forces from Gaza. We need a start without delay of Gaza and the West Bank reconstruction through the Cairo International Conference. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to commend the Egyptian-Qatari-U.S. mediation that tries to put an end to this war. We also commend the positions of Egypt and Jordan, who reject the displacement of Palestinians, a matter rejected by the international community as well. The State of Palestine is the only entity eligible to assume full responsibility for governance and security in Gaza. This comes through an interim administrative committee affiliated to the Palestinian government in the West Bank with Arab and international support and participation. Hamas will have no role in governing. Hamas and other factions must surrender their weapons to the Palestinian Authority. What we want is one unified state without weapons, a state with one law and one legitimate security forces. We stress our condemnation of the occupation's crimes. We also condemn the killing and detention of civilians, including Hamas's actions on October the 7th, 2023. On the other hand, we call for an end to the settlements, the annexation, settlers' terrorism, and the attacks against Islamic and Christian holy sites. We condemn the occupation policies that isolate Jerusalem, Al-Quds, and expand construction on Area E1. We condemn the narrative, the Israeli narrative on Greater Israel, which flouts international law. It represents a direct threat to Arab national security and international peace. This comes in addition to the brutal aggression against the sovereignty of the brotherly state of Qatar and other Arab countries. This necessitates a firm, deterrent international stance. Ladies and gentlemen, the State of Palestine continues to adopt a comprehensive reform agenda promoting governance, transparency, the rule of law, and the reform of the financial system. It also works on the reform of educational curriculum in line with the UNESCO standards, and this will be achieved within 2 years. We're establishing a unified social welfare system after the abolition of all previous payments to the families of prisoners and martyrs. This system is currently undergoing international audit by a specialized international firm. We underline our commitment to organize presidential and parliamentary elections after the end of the war, and within 1 year. We will draft an interim constitution within 3 months to ensure the transfer of power from the authority to the state. This will ensure that no party or individual will participate unless they adhere to the political program and the international commitments of the Palestine Liberation Organization and the rules of international legitimacy. The elections will be held under international observance. Ladies and gentlemen, we desire a modern democratic state based on the rule of law, pluralism, power sharing, equality, justice, and the empowerment of women and youth. We commend the positions of those countries that recognized the state of Palestine. We call on those who have not yet done so to follow suit. We call for your support so that Palestine become a full-fledged member of the United Nations. We have already recognized the right of Israel to existence in 1988 and in 1993, and we still recognize the State of Israel. In this vein, I would like to thank France, Britain, Canada, Australia, and Belgium, in addition to Portugal, Luxembourg, San Marino, and Andorra, and other countries that have been mentioned by His Excellency, the President of France. And we recall with appreciation all 149 countries who have already recognized the state of Palestine earlier. They have participated in our long struggle, the last of which was Spain, Ireland, Norway, Slovenia, and Armenia. We would also like to commend the important role of the presidency of this conference, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and France, as well as Britain, in galvanizing more international recognition. We'd also like to thank all participating countries in this conference for their important role, issuing the New York Declaration and taking irreversible steps to bring about durable peace based on the two-state solution and based on international legitimacy. We would also like to commend the role of the brotherly and friendly countries that support our Palestinian cause in the international fora. We would like to commend, in particular, the role of Algeria, which is assuming the Arab seat in the Security Council. We commend the positions of the peoples and organizations that support the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people to freedom, independence, and statehood. We reject any confusion, I repeat, any confusion between the solidarity with the Palestinian cause and the issue of anti-Semitism. We reject the latter, proceeding from our values and principles. We would also like to express our readiness to work with the US President Donald Trump, with Saudi Arabia, France, and the United Nations and all partners to implement the peace plan adopted during this conference within a specific timetable with international guarantees and monitoring. This would open the gates towards a just peace and comprehensive regional cooperation. In this regard, I call upon Israel to immediately sit on the negotiating table, to put an end to this bloodshed and bring about just and comprehensive peace. And I address the Israeli people saying, our future and yours banks on peace. Enough violence and war. Our generations deserve to enjoy freedom and security. Let the people in our region live in durable peace and good neighborliness. And I would like to seize this opportunity to address all the Jews in the world, wishing them a good new year. And to our patient Palestinian people in their homeland and everywhere, I would like to tell you that the dawn of freedom and liberty is coming, no doubt. That day, ladies and gentlemen, is the day of the State of Palestine and the start of the peace process in the Middle East. We hope that we will call very soon to an international conference that will bring about this matter. Peace and blessings of God be upon you.
Je remercie le président.
I thank the President of the State of Palestine. Excellencies, distinguished representatives, before suspending the formal proceedings of the conference, we would ask you to kindly remain seated for the next part of this afternoon's program. This meeting is suspended.
Nous allons à présent
We will now listen to statements made by heads of state and government, including by the co-chairs of the working groups. They will present tangible efforts made to implement the New York Declaration. I remind you that this Assembly endorsed the New York Declaration by a vast majority to the tune of 142 votes. We remind delegations that statements are limited to 5 minutes for heads of state and government, and those by ministers should be limited to 3 minutes. Microphones will be cut off automatically after these time limits have been exceeded. I now give the floor to the King of Jordan, Your Majesty.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Friends, I thank France and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for convening this meeting. We meet here at the UN, where every country, every people are promised a voice. We meet to raise our voices for peace and for justice, for the only path to ensuring security for the Middle East and beyond, the two-state solution. This year marks the 80th anniversary of the United Nations. Almost every year since, our countries have met within these halls to decry the injustice and violence of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and seek solutions. And now, for nearly 2 years, we have been witnesses to a horrific level of bloodshed and destruction in Gaza. It stands in flagrant violations of international laws and the values of our shared humanity, and it threatens the foundations of future peace. The war in Gaza must end. Humanitarian aid must flow unhindered, and all illegal and unilateral measures in the West Bank and settler violence must also end. A clear choice stands before us. On one side, to continue down the dark and bloody path of war and conflict, or to take the path of peace through the two-state solution. And today the world is taking a significant step on the path to achieving just and lasting peace. This global rally behind the two-state solution sends a clear message. The conflict must end. The two-state solution is the only path to the just and lasting peace that fulfills the rights of all our peoples. We thank all countries that have recognized the state of Palestine, and now we must work to stop all measures that undermine the two-state solution. We must make sure that today is a step in a continued effort to realize it. As we work on ending the war in Gaza, we must also do all we can to restore hope. The commitment so many countries are making to a future of peace today begins that long, difficult, but essential process. Thank you.
Je remercie.
I thank His Majesty the King of Jordan. I now give the floor to the President of Turkey.
Sayın Devlet
Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, His Excellency the Secretary General, esteemed delegation members, let me greet you all with most heartfelt feelings and with kind regards. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to France and to Saudi Arabia, who are co-chairing this conference. I congratulate all the countries that have decided to recognize the state of Palestine for honoring the voice of justice and of conscience. I hope that this step, along with the initiatives to be undertaken in the coming period, will accelerate the implementation of a two-state solution. In our region, an unprecedented catastrophe has been unfolding for nearly 2 years now under the Israeli government's heavy and inhumane attacks. The massacre and brutality in Gaza continues with all its intensity. Since it is true that anyone who has a conscience cannot possibly accept this or remain silent vis-à-vis all this, the Netanyahu government is trying to make sure the following. Their goal is to make the establishment of a Palestinian state impossible and to force the Palestinian people to emigrate as much as possible. In the midst of these negative developments of a group of countries, among them members of the UN Security Council, they have taken the decision to recognize the state of Palestine, and this is an extremely significant and historic step. Now, we wholeheartedly wish we could see Palestinian President Mr. Abbas to be able to speak in this conference here today. Nevertheless, I find it extremely valuable that all the participants speaking today are also serving as the voice of the Palestinian people. It is also a fact that today the Palestinian cause has become a global issue. The participation in this hall today is the most important proof of this. In Europe, in Asia, the Americas, and Africa, we are witnessing people chanting "Free Palestine" on the streets, on social media, or in the press more than ever before now. This contradiction should not escape anyone's attention, including my friends here. The Netanyahu government governs today a society who, in the past, was targeted for eradication with the persecutions of the Holocaust. And today, his government is committing genocide against its own neighbors with whom they have shared the same land, the same water, air, and sea for thousands of years. Standing up against this oppression is not only a legal duty of the international community, but also a moral responsibility. The international community must stop expansionism in the West Bank, also the fait accompli in East Jerusalem, and the attempts to spread instability in the region. Otherwise, we cannot possibly talk about the presence of an international order or talk about defending universal values. The goal of deepening occupation and annexation policies is clear. The goal is to kill the vision of a two-state solution, to leave no ground for the state of Palestine to survive, to exile the Palestinian people, and to implement their expansionist ambitions by fueling instability in the region. Now, this cannot be allowed. At this conference today, I hope that the countries that have shown the courage to recognize the state of Palestine will follow through on this historic stance with determined, concrete, and deterrent steps. It is now necessary to declare a ceasefire, ensure unhindered access to humanitarian aid to Gaza, and for Israel to withdraw its forces from Gaza. Apologies. I cannot hear the President. I lost his voice. Apologies, ladies and gentlemen. This is the interpreter speaking. I cannot hear the President. His voice is gone. His voice is gone. We cannot hear him. Me and my colleague, we cannot hear the President. Apologies for this, but we're having a technical glitch here. We cannot hear the President. We stopped being able to hear him. His voice is gone completely. Sorry, but we cannot hear the President. His voice is gone completely. We stopped being able to hear him. And right next to our booth, we have colleagues from, we believe, the Brazilian delegation, the Portuguese booth, and I can see them from the window. They cannot hear the floor either. We cannot hear the floor. We cannot hear the floor. Oh, it's back.
Au président du Brésil.
I give the floor now to the President of Brazil.
I would like to commend President Emmanuel Macron and Prime Minister Mohammed bin Salman for leading this important process and event. The question of Palestine arose when the General Assembly adopted the so-called Petition Plan 78 years ago. The session in which it was approved was chaired by Brazilian Osvaldo Aranha. On that occasion, the two-state perspective was born, but only one materialized. The conflict between Israel and Palestine is the paramount symbol of the obstacles faced by multilateralism. It shows how the tyranny of the veto sabotages the very reason for the UN's existence, of avoiding atrocities like the ones that motivated its founding from happening again. It also goes against its universal vocation, blocking the admission as a full member of a state whose creation derives from the authority of the General Assembly itself. A state is based on three pillars: territory, population, and government. All have been systematically undermined in the Palestinian case. How can we talk about territory in the face of an illegal occupation that grows with each new settlement? How do you keep a population in the face of the ethnic cleansing we are witnessing in real time? And how do you build a government without empowering the Palestinian Authority? As the Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territories pointed out, there is no more appropriate word to describe what is happening in Gaza than genocide. Therefore, Brazil decided to become a party to the case submitted by South Africa to the International Court of Justice. The terrorist acts committed by Hamas are unacceptable. Brazil was emphatic in condemning them. But the right to defense does not authorize the indiscriminate killing of civilians. Nothing justifies taking the lives or mutilating more than 50,000 children. Nothing justifies destroying 90% of Palestinian homes. Nothing justifies using hunger as a weapon of war, nor targeting starving people seeking help. 500,000 Palestinians do not have enough food, more than the population of Miami or Tel Aviv. Hunger does not afflict the body only, it shatters the soul. What is happening in Gaza is not only the extermination of the Palestinian people, but an attempt to annihilate their dream of a nation. Both Israel and Palestine have the right to exist. Working to achieve a Palestinian state means correcting an asymmetry that compromises dialogue and obstructs peace. We salute the countries that recognize Palestine, as Brazil did in 2010. We are already the vast majority of the 193 members of the UN. Brazil commits to strengthening controls on imports from illegal settlements in the West Bank and maintaining a suspension of exports of defense materials, including dual-use materials that could be used in crimes against humanity and genocide. Given the Security Council's failure to act, the General Assembly must exercise its responsibility. We support the creation of a body inspired by the Special Committee Against Apartheid, which played a central role in ending the South African racial segregation regime. Securing Palestine's right to self-determination is an act of justice and an essential step toward restoring the strength of multilateralism and recovering our collective sense of humanity. Thank you very much.
I thank the President of Brazil. I now give the floor to the President of Portugal.
Madam President of the General Assembly, Mr. Secretary General, Monsieur le Président de la République Française,
President of the French Republic,
the Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Mr. President of the Palestinian State, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Portugal formally recognized the State of Palestine as a sovereign state with full rights. This decision reflects our conviction that the two-state solution is the only viable path for a just and lasting peace in the Middle East. By reaffirming it here, Portugal seeks to contribute to a broader international effort towards peace, justice, and stability. If we do not act, the crisis will leave scars for generations, fueling extremism and further instability. So, humanitarian access must be ensured without delay. All hostages must be released. Terrorism like October the 7th can never be justified. And civilians, regardless of nationality, religion, or ethnicity, must be protected at all times. And therefore, a ceasefire must be attained immediately. Portugal's commitment to peace in the Middle East has been constant and clear. We have always defended the two-state solution in line with the United Nations resolutions and the 67 borders. We supported Palestine's observer status in 2012, voted to enlarge its rights in the Assembly in 2024, and endorsed the New York Declaration earlier this year. We welcome the unprecedented commitments made, but is clear. Recognition of the State of Palestine is clear. Recognition of the State of Palestine is recognition of peace itself. Now, today, tomorrow would have been too late. Thank you.
I thank the President of Portugal. I now give the floor to the President of Indonesia.
His Excellency President Emmanuel Macron, President of the French Republic, His Highness Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud, Foreign Minister of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, as the co-chairs of this distinguished meeting. Co-chairs, Excellencies, distinguished representatives of the United Nations, I wish to extend our deepest appreciation and highest regards to the governments of France and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for their leadership in convening this important deliberation. It is with a heavy heart that we recall the ongoing unbearable tragedy in Gaza. Thousands of innocent lives, many of them women and children, have been killed. Famine looms. Human catastrophe is unfolding with our eyes. We condemn all acts of violence against innocent civilians. Therefore, it is today with dignity that we gather to take our historical responsibility. This responsibility speaks not only to the fate of Palestine, but also to the future of Israel, and also the very credibility of the United Nations. We condemn all violence against innocent civilians. Therefore, Indonesia once again reiterates its commitment to the two-state solution in the Palestine problem. Only this two-state solution will lead to peace. We must guarantee statehood for Palestine, but Indonesia also declares that once Israel recognizes the independence and the statehood of Palestine, Indonesia will immediately recognize the state of Israel, and we will support all guarantees for the security of Israel. The New York Declaration has provided a peaceful and just pathway towards peace. Statehood must mean peace. Recognition must mean a real chance towards lasting peace. It must be a real peace for all sides, for all parties. Distinguished Excellencies, we commend the leading states of the world that have taken this principled step. France, Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom, Portugal, and many other leading countries of the world have taken a step on the right side of history. The recognition of the state of Palestine is the right step on the right side of history. To those who have yet to act, we say, history does not stand still. We must recognize Palestine now. We must stop the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. Ending the war must be our utmost priority. We must overcome hatred, fear. We must overcome suspicion. We must achieve the peace that is necessary for the human family. We are ready to take our part in this journey towards peace. We are willing to provide peacekeeping forces. Thank you very much. Peace. Peace now. Peace immediately. We need peace. Thank you very much.
Je remercie le président de l'Indonésie.
I thank the President of Indonesia. I now give the floor to the President of Senegal.